PGA Tour agrees with players on new governance, that's a good word, and transparency measures, welcomes Tiger Woods as a policy board member. I will spare you the super boring details, but the gist of it is, as a part of new transparency and governance measures, Tiger Woods has agreed to join the tour's policy board as a sixth player director. So now the board will include 6 player directors, 5 independent directors, and the PGA of America director. So, Greg, I will get into more of these details, but what this in essence does is swing the balance of power of the board towards the players. They now have the biggest chunk of voice, so to speak.
Yes, and also, they're going to there's a potential gray area here, but any future shifting, monumental decision is going to be made with the player director's input first, which has probably never been needed before. Most of the big things that happen on the PGA Tour before LIV, as far as the direction of the tour, have been, who's going to sponsor. Like, we're going to get FedEx to sponsor, and there's going to be a big payout at the end of the year for you. Like, as a player, I don't need input on that. So we haven't really, like, that's great for me. Everything has been to enhance the ability for the players on the PGA Tour. So there's been very little need to know situations that are future shifting like this. And now all of a sudden there's really big future decisions. The structure, the layout of the PGA Tour as we know it feels like it's in the air to some degree right now. So I find that to be an interesting aspect. The other aspect that I find interesting is that this comes from 41 players, including Scottie Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, and
Bryce Garnett
players. Bryce Garnett, right? I'm sure there's a number. You got 41 guys that send a letter to the PGA Tour on Monday, and this comes out on Tuesday. And that's a pretty swift form of action. So I think the PGA Tour right now is in this mode of regaining trust of players, and they want to do anything they can to make the players feel like their voice is heard. This is a step in the right direction. Now, I have a concern with this right now, because also, like I said earlier, never before have there been future swaying decisions to be made where player input would be required at this kind of level. There also haven't really been very many decisions with a deadline like this, right? A January 1st deadline. And I think that's a big aspect because now you've added voices, you've added input, and anytime you add input, decisions take longer to make. Like if I ask my kids what they want to eat, I'm going to get 2 different answers. Right? Because they're both going to want something different, and there's going to be a discussion about it, an argument, tears, all of that. Whereas if I just give them something, there still may be tears, but the decision time is is a lot less, and they're going to be eating something a whole lot healthier. So when you add voices into discussions, decisions tend to take longer. That's my biggest concern.
Yeah. So this memo would go on to say that the tour, the players, Commissioner Monahan, are going to amend the policy board's governing documents to make it clear that, quote, no major decision can be made in the future without the prior involvement of and approval of the player directors. Secondly, the player director's special advisor, that's Colin Neville, will be fully aware of the state of the negotiations contemplated by the framework agreement and provided with all the access of documents and information that he needs to carry out his duties. There will also be this commitment to full transparency moving forward and Tiger Woods getting that coveted spot as player director on the board. To me, Patrick, Greg is right. The PGA Tour has a trust and transparency issue. Tiger Woods is the answer to that issue.
Well, I would say Jay Monahan has a trust and transparency issue.
I 100% agree that Jay Monahan has a trust and transparency issue, not the PGA Tour.
And I think he showed his cards last week with that player's memo that was leaked, where you have all these governing bodies. When they make a decision, it's a press release. The PGA Tour's, what if that player memo was never leaked? What if the Athletic never got its hands on it? It was kind of just thrown into random news that Jason Gore got promoted, that Patrick Cantlay and Webb Simpson are going to be on this search committee for Randall Stevenson's replacement. And, just for clarity, Tiger's not replacing Randall Stevenson. They still have to add another person to this board. And he kind of just threw that in there. And to me, it came across as, I am Jay Monahan and I need job security ASAP. I need to appease to the players who, all of them, don't want anything to do with the rollback, except, Rory's been on record saying if the ball is rolled back, he'd probably play that rolled back ball in PGA Tour competition.
Which is a nightmare for the PGA Tour.
Exactly. I mean, you say it without saying it type of deal. Mm-hmm. And he kind of showed his hand, where all he really cares about right now, after pulling off this deal behind everyone's back, is damage control and job security. And so for the PGA Tour players to pounce on this like they did, kudos to them. And to Greg's point, I really have two main questions. And the first one is that timeline. It has to be in jeopardy. When you add new voices to the table, like it says there, Colin Neville, who only spells his name with one L, bit of a red flag in my opinion, is going back and forth between the players. He's kind of the middleman. He gets to see all the details, all the documents, all the negotiating going back and forth. And this is the same guy who was at the Delaware meeting last year as well. Mm-hmm. So they know him quite well. You add all these voices, like a Rory McIlroy, who says, I hate LIV. I still hate LIV. You got the LIV boys still saying, Phil Mickelson still tweeting, we're still fine. We're going to do great. So now you're really going to push these guys in a pinch where that last one, player directors have the authority to approve or deny any changes to the tour as part of the framework agreement discussions. Okay, well, Yasser wants these guys to play, one team event a year. Rory's like, not happening. You're just adding more and more budging back and forth. And it's August 1st. You've got 5 months, August, September. I think that's 5 full months to figure this all out. And you add more voices. Greg, congrats. You got more kids. You got 5 more kids to feed.
That's a problem.
Is Tiger Woods, and I think the answer is yes, he's the only guy that the players would care about to be put in a position like this. He is the impenetrable one who turned down close to $1 billion, stayed loyal. They have basically taken his vision, his words. We've heard this throughout the last 2 years. Hey, if Tiger doesn't like it, I don't like it. Or when we get to the Delaware meeting, who was running the show there? Who flies in with Ricky just for the meeting? Tiger does, right?
Don't forget about Ricky.
So the idea, and I'm not sure if this makes it more likely that the framework agreement becomes a reality or less likely, but Tiger Woods has the sway of all of these names and then some.
The beauty of this is, while there's 5 more mouths to feed, there's one representative, and I think that having, again, go back to the kids analogy, or we can shift to a political analogy. The executive branch can make decisions a whole lot quicker than Congress because it's one guy against a whole lot of people. And when you have someone like Tiger Woods sitting there, his voice and his sway can take these 5 players and unite them together. There were these rumors about a coup that was being started with Patrick Cantlay. I don't know whether that's true or not, but
Cantlay. Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to call out Patrick Cantlay in any way here. I'm just saying, if one of these 5 players has an ulterior motive and wants to halt this deal, in essence, that becomes possible with this news. But I also think it's a whole lot harder to do when you have Tiger Woods sitting there. And do you really want to try to pull something off that's on the shady side to benefit yourself in front of Tiger Woods? I think that's going to be a whole lot harder to do. So, impenetrable, Rick, is a great word to explain Tiger. But the hope for me is that they understand how important it is for the tour's future success to get a deal done. And at some point, you're going to have to make compromises. You're going to have to do things that you don't want to do. Things are going to be in there that you don't like, but hopefully that's for a long-term benefit.
Yeah, I think, when the players' first demand, according to the Washington Post, was to put Tiger on the board. That was like number one. Like, you got to put him on the board. We already talked to him behind your back. He said yes. No offense, you weren't in that conversation, Jay. And I think the second point is, we talk about this majority being 6-5 in the players' favor. The PGA director, or PGA of America director, John Lindert, I guess he does have a voting right per the Washington Post, but he doesn't usually exercise it.
He abstains.
So if Jay and the rest of them guys, Jimmy, Eddie, they all want to throw a Hail Mary, it's probably going to be kissing the feet of Johnny Boy.
That is interesting. It's truly, we've entered full succession.
Right.
Realms. I mean, we can start making those comps at any point here. The thing about this, and Patrick, I'm going to go back to you here, because you were kind of getting down this road where Tiger Woods, and Josh threw this in the chat as well, I think he kind of streamlines things a little bit, right? Because I think now what Tiger wants is what most players are probably going to agree. So he streamlines kind of that side of things, but just the public discourse of, have we gotten any closer to making framework reality? Phil Mickelson is letting us know none of the live guys want to be a part of this. Why would they? They've got the best end of the deal, right? They don't want to be a part of this. You've got trust issues on Jay Monahan's side of things. We've got a ticking time bomb. We have a schedule that is apparently going to be released for next year, next week. We've got a lot of stuff to figure out and not a lot of time to do it. Does the news from today, in your opinion, make it more likely framework comes to reality or less likely?
That's a very good question, because you would think there's a somewhat united front now. Kevin Streelman talked about it, saying, Jay said a lot of the right things last week in the PAC meeting. You have this come to light. I mean, what could Jay Monahan have done if he said no to these 41 players? If he was like, you know what, Tiger Woods, sorry, buddy. Like, does that scenario ever cross his mind? I don't think it does.
Not if he likes his job.
He's in such a pickle. He's up against the ropes that he has to do it. And the players felt that. Does this mean the framework agreement is streamlined? I don't think so. Because even though Tiger Woods is this voice, there's just so many differing opinions on this. Still, even on the PGA Tour, it comes across as a united front. Not everyone has the same opinion on it.
There's a chance Tiger punts this, Greg, right? And it's just like, this stinks. Why? These guys aren't going to play team events. They're not going to do this, that, and the other thing. And also, Tiger does have to, I think Tiger's obviously a good representative for a lot of reasons, but the idea that he doesn't, outside of money, which he doesn't need and has already turned down, he doesn't necessarily have to, he shouldn't be thinking for himself. This is a guy that if we're lucky is going to play 4 times a year for the next, like if we're lucky, right? So he is only looking out for everybody else because he is kind of so far removed from the game right now.
Right. It doesn't matter what happens. I mean, he does have an event on the PGA Tour, one event, but again, he has the Hero World Challenge. You know, he is one of the very few players who can create an event with no tour attached and have some of the best players of the world
PGA
there.
Tour, you'd get the same players, the same venue, the same people, nothing would change.
So he's largely unaffected.
Right.
More so than anybody else. I do think that's a good thing to have on your side. But he doesn't have anything really to lose. Right. So if he takes a hard stance and says this isn't worth it and it ends up going badly for the PGA Tour, you kind of have created a little bit of a problem. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm not saying that's going to, and I doubt it will. I think that that Tiger Woods also has an effect on Yasser, right? I think he affects the other side in the negotiating table. And if there's ever a situation where he wants to sit down in a meeting with Yasser, I think Tiger has a little bit of pull there, right? I mean, you have this opportunity to get into that world. And I think that's an attractive thing to the PIF to be a part of that. So the question, just like in any negotiation, is who wants it more and who has more to lose. And I know that the PGA Tour has a lot to lose. I don't know what the PIF has to lose. And they may feel like they have a lot, like they have to get the deal done. My concern is that they don't. That's the concern to me, but they might. So I don't know how all that's going to play out. And then I just wanted to add one more thing on Jay Monahan. And I think this speaks in a positive light to him because I do think he had another option. He could have gotten a definitive agreement done without player consent. Right. This could get signed, sealed, and delivered. He could bend the knee to Yasser, if you will, gotten this done and cemented himself as the CEO of this framework agreement. And players would have been really upset. But he could have built in job security, I think. Maybe not, but it feels like he could have pushed this down the road a little bit farther, and it would have been very demonstrative. It would have been the wrong thing to do. But he could have gone that way. And I think the fact he didn't, I mean, he doesn't want to deal with that kind of stuff. I really do think he wants to do what's best for the players. And this is at least a step in showing that.
Go ahead, Pat.
I think the Tiger point's really interesting from Greg, where we could have a little, you could call it negotiating, you could call it quid pro quo, where we saw it there in the initial framework agreements, how bad Yasser and PIF wanted Tiger. You think about him owning a live golf team, him playing 10 times in a year, him going to Saudi Arabia. They wanted 10
times in his backyard a year.
Yeah, it was literally one of Greg's kids was putting it together. It's like, we want more Tiger. We want to see Tiger all the time. Where Tiger, if he is doing this out of the goodness of his heart and for the legacy of the PGA Tour and what everyone wants to assume, which we have no real reason not to, he could be like, you know what, Yasser? Fine. I'll play once in Saudi Arabia for you. I'll do it. And then get all this come back in PGA Tour's favor. Like Greg said, a little give and take.
Listen, I can't do 10, but I could do 1.
Exactly. Drop that 0.
Tiger, we'd love to have you.
Exactly.
We'd love to have you.
So I think that'll be very interesting if that, I assume it'll be brought up some way, shape, or form.
Let's really go off the rails here. What is the likelihood in the next 5 weeks, months, years, Tiger Woods is the commissioner of the PGA Tour? That's part 1. Part 2 is way, way crazier.
No. I don't think he'll do it.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want a full-time job.
Why does he need to do it?
Yeah.
No, he can be the quasi commissioner.
He basically is.
He basically is. So he doesn't need to tackle the responsibilities of, signing corporate deals.
Okay. Part 2. This one keeps me up at night. What is stopping Tiger Woods from rounding up his billionaire buddies, taking these 41 players, and making the Tiger Tour with all the parts of LIV that they want, all the parts of the PGA Tour that they want, the most player friendly, whatever you want to pitch this as? There is no tournament that currently exists that could not exist if Tiger made a phone call. They would go to Jack's Place and play the Memorial. You'd have all the legacy still built in because they play the same events at the same courses. I feel a lot like the PGA Tour is unfortunately in a position like the NCAA is in. The NCAA exists because it's always existed. And that's just been the framework. And as schools got more powerful, as athletes have gotten more powerful, you see things like the NIL. You see things like all of this conference reorganization. We are like 10 years away from the NCAA no longer existing because it doesn't have to. If University of Texas and the University of Alabama and all these big schools came together and said, yeah, we're going to have a football championship. We're not going to do it under the NCAA and we're just going to put it all together. It would be just as popular as it is now. So what is stopping that from happening?
Well, Rick, I like where you're heading. I like this path we're going down. The view is great. And to take it one step further, we could even build a campus down there in Florida, have teams of 3, all virtual since Tiger Woods can't walk. We'll play Monday nights.
He's already doing this. Right.
Strictly Monday nights. And we'll call it the TGL.
Oh, the golf league.
The golf league.
Yeah, you're right. But you know what I mean? Like it's just like, I know there's a lot of logistics in play, but we have learned, Greg, that the PGA Tour was not as protected as maybe anybody thought or considered, or maybe no one even thought or considered because it didn't matter before.
The reason the reason the PGA Tour wasn't protected, if you will, is because it's all the players make up the PGA Tour. Right. And so players have individual choice. And when there's no options, they play the best place to play, which is the PGA Tour. And all of a sudden you get another option and there's an opportunity to make more money. Some players decide to go that direction. So if Tiger, if he could fund that, which I'm sure he could, it would be something that's very possible to him. But it feels like Tiger wants the PGA Tour to exist. It feels like Tiger likes the PGA Tour. He thinks the PGA Tour should exist. And he is the most important aspect in that, right? He would be the most important domino to fall. So, I mean, it's his world and we're all living in it, which has been said before. But I think if you're a PGA Tour fan like me, you're glad to have Tiger on your side.